Hello, and we're coming back into conversation. Kristen and I are creating a part two of the body's wisdom and gold because we felt there was some deeper conversations that we started with the first part of the podcast, and we felt like we really wanted to dive in deeper. So if you have a cup of tea, we're just going to invite you to make sure you bring it along for the journey. And we talked about our tea in the first part, but we just really want to dive into a couple nuggets that we think will bring more richness into your life as you're thinking about what we're going to say. So, Kristen, you've been advancing your workshops and opening up your discovery. Do you want to talk about what's been happening for you?
Absolutely. One of the things recently that's been happening with Dance Alchemy is that I would say the subject matter, what we're exploring in the workshops, is really expanding quite a bit. And so to give you an example, originally when I started designing Dance Alchemy for the soul workshops and leading them, we were focused on exploring things like the chakra system, the energy centers in the body. So phenomenon like grounding, personal power, self-expression, truth, connection to self and others through the heart space. And I've one of the things in the process of just creating them is that we've started to explore territories like designing your life from the future, which is a lot more conceptual, and how that things like that have evolved is it's been a lot of a direct result of things I've been currently exploring in my own studies. I'm always doing metaphysical studies and healing work with myself. So I this past half of the year have been doing a lot with things like vision, being in the unknown, more metaphysical neuroscience concepts, as well as Eastern philosophy and dance alchemy. So the last workshop I did, it was called Ahead of Time, was using the body and movement as a way to explore our relationship to our past and our future. And what was really interesting about it was the range of responses to that from students about how attached some people are to the past. Like, oh, I want to stay there. It's so nostalgic. I can't see anything in the future.
Mhm.
To another person who said, I don't know what my future is, but I know now from my body's sensation, I trust it. I really trust it. I know something, and she's going through a really rough patch in her professional life right now. And she kind of can't see what's on the horizon because she feels very stuck in the muck, in the weeds.
Mhm.
But she really got like, I'm going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And then another student who she said, I know that some really great stuff is coming in my business. I'm present to how surrounded I am by community and how much I love connecting with my clients, my customers. She has this artisanal, all handmade, organic soaps and bath bombs and CBDs, and she puts so much love. She literally makes everything by hand. She said, "The women who I serve, I know that they're going to uplift me, and I'm going to uplift them." So it was just it was a fascinating inquiry through the body, like
Mhm.
literally using the surfaces of walls and metaphors for what's on the other side, and can you get to it, and our, like you said, our blinders about what we can see, and when we explore life and we don't realize there's other possibilities. So I've been venturing a little farther and farther out into the unknown with dance alchemy, is the way I'll say it, and it's been glorious. I hope that answered.
Yeah, it's so interesting because people don't think about step over into that. I've done some workshops where I have different concepts that people step into on the floor
Yes.
and then turn around, look in different directions. What's the perspective? What do you see when you look back over at hobbies, as an example, or when you look over at your profession or the the people that are in your life currently, and then what does it feel like in that space? And uh, people just sometimes we're just so either we're wrapped up into that moment or we're so wrapped up on that road that we're on. It's like we have the GPS set, and so we're just going to go there, even if it takes us on a slightly uh, circuitous route to get there. But we're still going to follow it instead of letting ourselves fall off the path and then look back. We used to call it nuggets when we came to visit here in Cape Breton as visitors rather than as residents. And things would happen because we would just see what the day wanted to unfold for us, and then we'd call them nuggets. At the end of the day, we go, wow, we had 5 nuggets today because we didn't plan where we were going to go. We just let the universe decide for us and the way we would go. Um, yeah, just that openness to have that reflective time. It's so rich.
Yes.
And as you started diving into it, I'm curious because of the conversation we had in part one about being in that space where your time isn't present. So for you, as you were exploring and diving deeper into these concepts, how did that unfold for you?
Well, I mean, it part of it was, when I'm creating a dance alchemy, a lot of my processes, I go into my studio and I have a concept, and then I will, find pieces of music and see what, in terms of how to explore it, like what comes up, and certain images will come to mind. But the past and future phenomenon, I think part of it was my willingness to kind of be led by my intuition about what is it about my past that I want to reflect on. What patterns do I notice that I tend to gravitate towards or feel stuck in, even moving through space? What's familiar?
Mhm.
And then to just like in any in other forms of timelessness, like meditation, for example, what is it that has me allow myself to surrender, to let go of all of the sensory information, to turn inward, to stop thinking so much, and to shift into another space. And it was, my own exploration and my willingness to sort of transcend amongst those different spaces that gave me a structure. And whenever I create something, I know that if it resonates for me, that I feel it genuinely and I have some kind of a deep response to it, it's effective on myself. I trust it enough then to share it with other people, knowing, of course, that they will not have the same experience. And I don't want them to, right? Because I
Mm,
always tell them, like, what you get is your gold. You shouldn't get what I get. It might be a flavor of what I got,
mhm,
but it might not. And that doesn't matter because
mhm,
that's what makes it all personal and meaningful.
mhm,
So yeah,
mhm,
it was really, I have to say that the this is a challenge to myself, that the willingness to allow myself to be in that space of not knowing and pure creativity, whether it's exploring time or any concept with the body, it is sometimes the most challenging, but also the most liberating space to be in.
mhm,
The ego fights it because the ego wants to know and control, but
mhm.
gold is when you can get yourself to surrender.
Yes. About how many people do you have in a class when you're doing these?
It's usually somewhere around 10 people. My
Mhm,
space is not huge. About 10 feels like the space is pretty max. So
mhm,
somewhere, between like 6 and 10 is my sweet spot. When I lead online, it can be, you know, unlimited number of people. I've led to 100 people online and had no idea. Like I was like, I hope this works. And And it did. I mean,
Hmm.
there was magnification, right? We were talking about being on Zoom, and there was something in the collective energy that was beyond elevated things, beyond anything. And I actually have to say that's the more people we've had, it actually does always have an elevating effect. When I have more than 10, it just, but,
Hmm.
but in person, because as you said, that's a different animal, that in person smaller group is equally very
Hmm.
powerful for different reasons.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And I'm thinking about my own experience with dance, being in the room and moving with those people. It's that kind of experience. And online, when you're moving in your own space, yes, you might be moving in a new way, but it's a little bit different that when you would be exploring with the person beside you who reaches their arm out and you're only a few inches from each other, and how your arm reaches out. That's a little bit different than online where you have your whole wide room of your own space to be able to move around in.
Yes.
Um, I do know with my chi integration class, which I've been teaching online, we tried in person and online one. So even the people who live in town still come in online, just because then we're all kind of in that same space. But it is that magnification of what everybody brings to the table. And I have one person who's 86, and so she's not thinking about goal setting like a 50-year-old or a 40-year-old might want to do. She's at a different place in her life and a lot of reflective and what am I leaving and what's my legacy and how can I change globally. And so as we bring our smaller kinds of topics to the table, she brings this whole overarching global piece. And so as you were saying, how that experience of online magnifies, and it's that interaction of all of us together, that we have our individual little goals, but then we have this piece that pulls us together for this magnificence of wholeness.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
and I really so enjoy that aspect of what other people can bring in.
So wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The depth and the breadth. It adds such richness when you
Hmm.
have people gathered,
Hmm.
whether it's virtual or live. It really, yeah, it adds such a richness for sure.
Hmm. So as people are listening to the podcast and wondering, I'm just thinking about some of the people that I work with on one-on-one situations and or in a class setting, and they go home and they feel guilty because they didn't do their homework. They didn't practice the movement pattern that we did, and they come back the next week and they can't remember, and they get stuck in that whole repetitive pattern piece. At which it doesn't matter to me, either you did it or you didn't. It doesn't matter. You're here now. Let's do it. But I'm thinking about those people that are going, I want a little bit more. I want more than just what I have been doing. Are there some little exploration pieces or maybe some introductory pieces that you've already got on your website to give people that taste, to help them dive in and see if this is the way they want to start exploring?
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. So I have a simple Dance Alchemy for the Soul recording. And it's all about finding your sense of grounding in the unknown. And it's available on my website. So if you go to my website, kristenmangionedance.com, you can get the free little sample taste of Dance Alchemy, and you can listen to it as many times as you want. You could even do it as a daily practice if you chose to, which can be quite interesting because there's something in continuously engaging with something that you're not the same person you were yesterday. You've
Mm-hmm.
lived and experienced different things. Your body is different. So I always tell my students, your body is different every day. So when you come in, it's an opportunity to check in to see like, how are things today? And you'll discover also you have patterns. But it's giving yourself that gift of I'm checking in today and let's see what happens. And you get to explore the depth and the breadth of who you perceive yourself to be. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's not just that, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I also think about the quality of the day you want to have.
Mm.
So what you're doing today and the tasks you have in hand wouldn't necessarily be what you did the day before. So if you're coming back into that exercise and you're thinking about the quality of your day that you want rather than the goal or an intention, that also could change that whole experience. And you may
Absolutely.
find that where those little blocks in the body happen to be for that kind of quality, and then being able to just, I want to say, untie the shoestring, just let it go, let it unravel. Yeah, beautiful. Oh, wow. Okay. So the next part I want to share with the listeners is mapping the heart, because you talked about it in part one, but let's dive a little bit deeper into this process because it's so exciting.
So, mapping the heart is a multi-year, multi-stage project that I'm currently at work on. And it's basically exploring the depth and breadth and also the expansive nature of the heart field. And it is really the genesis of, as I shared in part one, how I started Dance Alchemy with wanting to do a workshop back in 2019 about the heart space, with through the body as a place to explore. And so, mapping the heart, it is a series of workshops, both live as well as virtual, focusing on primarily on the heart, and then that's the jumping off point. But it also gets into the arc between what I call the personal and the transpersonal. So in the chakra system, the energy centers on which, things like a lot of yogic practice are based, the heart is really considered the middle of the chakra system. The lower chakras have more to do with personal survival and getting what we need and asserting our will. So when you get to the heart, that's where we connect with the world. So we do that first through relationship and with self. And then we get into the throat chakra about expression, the brow about vision, and the crown about that at a higher level, so called. Things are more holistic and connected. So mapping the heart starts at the level of the individual and a dark night of the soul, basically, and goes from there all the way a journey in four parts to really expanding, like where everything is connected. Now, in addition to the ongoing workshops, virtual as well as some in person, I have been making a piece of choreography, a dance film currently, with each stage. And the first film, which is called Broken, which is about that dark night of the soul, is now up online. So anyone can tune in and see it through my website, KristenMangioneDance.com. It's also in collaboration with, he is one of the founders of the ambient electronic music genre in the United States, Steve Roach, who he's been a very influential composer for the last 40 years. And he has very graciously partnered with me in this exploration. So his music is featured in the first film and will be continuing on the next three parts, with other of his featuring his pieces of music. And the connection there is that we share a belief that our respective genres are really about elevating consciousness and opening vision, and also connecting humanity, like humanity's potential,
Mm-hmm.
spirit,
Mm-hmm.
ancestral as well as celestial spirit, and our connection with the eternal, whether that's source or God or the divine or inner self or whatever you say it is, the
Mm-hmm.
greatest part of the all of it. So mapping the heart is the whole, all of that. And dance alchemy and the choreography are the two integral pillars
Wow.
of
That's
it.
an incredibly large and all-encompassing vision. And when I think back to the start of the conversation in part one of, the the linear track of a professional dancer, and then how you had the trajectory change for you, and then look at how you've come back to the dance, but in such a global, universal way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's not anything that I would have expected nor that I could have predicted. You know, one of
mhm,
those hindsight is 2020. Um, because as I was sharing in part one with my story, that it's like all the seemingly separate pieces that for many years I felt like I don't understand, like, why am I drawn to healing work? Why am I drawn to ontological transformational self-development? Why am I, and at my core, I'm never not going to be a dancer. Like, I know that if I'm dancing, I'm happy. I can't not be dancing. So, but all of a sudden it's like the pieces somehow have rearranged and emerged with a clarity of, this is so much bigger and it's not about me. That's really the big thing too. Not that artists would say it's about them, but my point is, I'm clear that it's a very universal message is what I'm interested
mhm, mhm. And I'm thinking back to the little person who's 3 who just dances because they just want to move, right?
in.
And it's just at the center of their universe. And then we come through, we want to look like all the other dancers. And then we move ourselves into we want to be dancing in life. And then the fact that then you can now take dance and think in its universal message and power, what it has the capacity to do for humanity. It's just so incredibly profound. And you don't think of that when that little person's twirling in their dress, on the floor. Or my grandson this weekend was dancing his um, construction song, and the diggers were pushing the dirt and the scoopers were doing this, so you're not thinking about what that little piece has the potential to do movement wise in life, with experience and everything behind it. As I'm thinking about the audience who's listening, and some people who may be struggling because they're not sure where they want to go or how they want to do things, they're looking for something that can help them transform. And you and I have both talked a lot about this whole movement piece. So I would invite the people listening that if you haven't been changing the way you move, you've continued to do that. You walk the same walk every day. You're walking and you're getting your exercise, but you haven't moved differently. Perhaps this is the impetus today that you found this podcast. You found part 2 to listen to how deep the dive can go. And now you have the means by which to reach out and find the kind of movement that you want to be doing and the kinds of transformations. So just take a little bit of reflective time on that and think about it. Kristen, do you want to add to that?
Well, I mean, it's so well said. I love what you just said. Like, today is the day to move differently, and it can be something as seemingly simple as walk a different route. You change your environment, you change your state of being just by
Mm-hmm.
doing that one seemingly simple thing. You give yourself new information, and there's so much research now about when you are digesting the same information every day, those patterns just keep being rewritten and reactivated in your brain and in your body. Just give yourself some new information, and it will be like a breath of fresh air. Start
Mm-hmm.
there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm also thinking about those people who do live with pain every day. And if the pain is fluctuating, then we know it's emotional, which is great because it means we can do something about it. It's not a structural piece. So it fluctuates, it comes in and out different times of the day. Now's the time to think about how the movements and changing. Maybe you wanted to go for that long walk, but you couldn't because of the pain that you're experiencing. Don't walk. Put on a really good piece of music, find a way to move. Check out Kristen's video and see, what does Dance Alchemy mean for you? Does that release the pain that's within? And if that does, then okay, now we're onto something. I need to be moving in a different way. And the pattern of walking might not be the right way at the moment. it might be down the road after you've released a few things from the body. So I'm just going to invite people to think about that, and think about then also about their thoughts, where they've been trying to, you mentioned, I'm not sure if it was in part one or part two, but the problem solving piece,
Mm-hmm.
and how people try to fill in, I walk this way because, and then they just fill it in and think it's correct because they solved it. And sometimes our assumptions are not always correct. So then just asking yourself, is this a correct assumption? Is this the correct way to be thinking about it? Um, when you're working with people, where do you notice their block tends to be?
Well, gosh, it's a great question. Of course, there's, some variety with the individual, but I would
Mm-hmm.
say there's often a lot of mental energy. That's the first place. Often just the shift between getting out of all the mental, and by mental, usually it trickles down to usually shoulders, like up in this trapezius area, the tops of the shoulders, upper
Mm-hmm.
back, because that's really like that's you're carrying the weight of the world, is the analogy. So
Mm-hmm.
I really feel like that upper quadrant for most people is the first place where you often see it, and you can see it in their posture without them even having to move. Um, that's a big one. And then often I feel like they're especially, well, men and women, but women, sometimes a disconnection in pelvis, what I call the hara area, which is your abdominals, your center of being in Chinese medicine. I feel like that often is another place where there's blocks, because a lot of it can be emotional. We also, from a physical standpoint, we sit so much in our current society way of being. So all of that fluidity and flexibility in the hips and the pelvis and the lower back, and then the abdominal support is often missing just out of habitual practice. So it's like the upper and the lower of the axial spine, those
Mm-hmm.
places. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then
Mm-hmm.
the other place this occurs to me is with all this heart work, there's almost always armoring around the heart.
Mm-hmm.
So the chest, like it's fascinating that very often when I do any kind of heart work, opening this place for people is a very big deal.
Mm-hmm.
They like it's like it will not move at all in the beginning, because they're like, I don't feel anything, because we become so habituated to just layer and layer and layer to protect,
Mm-hmm.
that it takes some de-armoring,
Mm-hmm.
breaking it down in, in stages,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
it's taken time to be built up. So
Exactly.
any of them, it takes a while,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not that it's impossible. It can be quite extraordinary how things can move and shift just with a little bit of attentive movement.
Mm-hmm. And that's the other piece, is not to be rushing it, because it's not like you're trying to get through 12 points and be done. It's
No.
the it's the here I am. What does this mean? And now reflect on it for a few days or weeks or whatever, and see how it fits within life. And then you move into the next part. And now, how does that weave into my life, change things? Um,
Exactly.
Nice, gentle process. Because I know for some people, they just want it all to be done.
Oh
But
yeah. We're
like you
so
said, 50 years
so
old,
yes.
you got 50 years and then some of stuff, you don't want to do it all in one day.
Yeah. Yeah. Nor should you. I mean, it's,
Exactly.
we're such intelligent creatures, the way that everything is, you know, it's so in its own way, it has its own kind of beautiful design to it, the way that we have put ourselves together as a way to maintain some kind of, balance, order, survive. And that's nothing wrong. That allows us to live and evolve and continue to live. But so it can be a really gentle process. You're shifting like one little string at a time in the weave to
Hmm.
reintegrate, right? You can't just rip it all apart and start all over. So yeah.
And it's, I think that other piece is, the integration part is so important. We were integrated when we were little. That's how we moved. but then we learned how to kick a ball, throw a ball, um, needle and thread, very isolated, specific movements. And like you said, sitting at a desk all day, driving in a car, very specific micro movements. Everything else frozen to accomplish that. And so, what I find with my work with people is reintroducing that idea of integration, and when things are integrated, how easy it is to move, and how it's not when the start of your day, things are all firing, but they're not firing in the same conversation. It's a lot more effort to get into the day. Yeah.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, definitely, definitely. Yeah, there's something about the holistic nature of the body and that when you have, I'm thinking about like functional anatomy, where there's less effort. We were talking in part one about um, as one matures and you're finding less tension, less effort, often out of necessity with things like managing pain or how to work correctly, because the body just doesn't take as much wear and tear. But there is something about when you get into integration and ease and wholeness, that there's mastery, it becomes possible. It's an interest. Isn't it interesting that it's like the full circle of coming back to how we began? We have
Mm-hmm.
to remember and be reminded that that's possible,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we get so far to the other side with the fine motor skills.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And one other thing I wanted to point out you talked about was when you go into the studio to build these pieces, you're finding the right piece of music to go with the movement. And I just wanted to bring that to people's awareness because the music does make a difference. The addition of that, because you can go for a walk, but it's the addition of the song, which could be nature if you're paying attention to it, the song, the frequency that's around you that will make the transition much easier than without. And Tai Chi we often do without music, but when we've added music and we just go into the movements that you were talking about, that whole free timelessness space, when we're doing the set and the music is playing, it's just so rich. And so being able to think about what activities you have, that music can really be a part of it and not something that goes against it that makes it harder to move, but allows you to just fall into it and feel freer with it. So I just invite people to think about that. They may have some favorite music that they do listen to, and then they may have some that brings up memories, but those memories might bring them to patterns of movement that aren't necessarily supportive. So coming into a position where they can do a workshop with the music that you've already identified and brought forward and know how it's going to work can be so opening for people if it's an area they have been having trouble trying to find how to come through their conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely echo what you said, that, it creates a particular reality in space when you have some kind of an oral component, because it immediately will so inform a person's experience. And I purposely choose, things that don't have lyrics, because I lead through, it's all verbal. So I really want the voice to be the primary, information. But then underneath that, there's this other layer that does something with the brain. And some of it is meant to, things like if we're moving through space, it's going to support that, as opposed to a more meditative, shifting to a different vibrational state in the brain. But it's all, it's all very intentional for me. And it goes back to my being a choreographer, that it's the same thing when I make a piece of dance. It's often with a particular piece of music in mind or already in place, because I know that this is the whole reality and world of what is being created. So in that way, I really can, it may sound funny, but I've always felt from the beginning that Dance Alchemy for the Souls, it's like I give people the experiences, if they could step into my dances that would be on stage. Otherwise, they become the dancers in the piece, but we're all co-creating it as it's happening. Which for me as the artist, that's one of the things I love. Like there's nothing else
Mm-hmm.
at
Mm-hmm.
the top of my list. So that's it's really blissful to me. So
Mm-hmm.
that, so the music, the totality. I mean, like I even do things with lighting, if they're in my space with me, like, you know, I'll intentionally choose certain things because I want to give them that same kind of immersive experience. So music is definitely at the heart of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh, that's just when you said being able to step in. One of the things for me was to go to the Van Gogh exhibit and to be able to stand within that art and then feel what it was like to be in the center of the art. And it never occurred to me what it would be like to stand in the center of the choreographer's creation. And you don't have to be the professional, you just have to be the participant. That
Exactly.
is so rich, so rich.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when you have a group of people, whether it's, you know, virtual or in person.
Mm-hmm.
It's, and it, you know, as you say that, it reminds me what I feel like I've, in some conversation I was sharing about this, that it's the heightened energy of that. That's the commonality.
Mm-hmm.
There's a heightened energy in that timeless space where all the attention is focused on that. You know, that's what makes live performance exciting. That's what makes dance alchemy for me exciting. You know, anything, probably your Tai Chi, you know, it's just like, oh, this is all there is in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Or looking at that Van Gogh painting. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Wow. Well, Kristen, thank you for taking the time to share this extra piece because I think this really gives people a way to think differently about how they're taking care of themselves and how they want to choose to transform. And I so appreciate what you are bringing to the world with your work. Thank you for continuing to dive deeper into it and finding other ways for us to explore through dance. So I'm so appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been my absolute privilege and pleasure. Thank you so much, Michelle.
So if you didn't listen to part one, please go back and listen. And thank you so much for tuning in for this second part. And we look forward to, if you want to share with us some of your discoveries as a result of our conversation and what you've thought about where you need to go next. We would love to hear about that. So please reach out. So I say be well and thank you so much for being here. Thanks, Kristen.